Um, so this year's theme, which we sort of kicked off last week, this year's theme is growing the body. Growing the body. Last year's theme was we are the body. This year's theme is we are growing the body. We want to be a church that is growing, and we mean more than just trying to get more people to come and fill these seats, more than having our numbers higher on those who are watching the live stream at home. It is more than counting those numbers. We want to grow as followers of Jesus. Last week, I sort of set us up for that by talking about having a mindset of growth. That being something that we desire, that we lean into, that we expect, that we want as living people in God's family, as the living body of Christ, we expect that part of that life, part of being a healthy body, is that we grow. And I concluded last week by inviting you to imagine. Just imagine what it would be like if there was a family, an entire family of spiritually maturing people who looked more and more like Jesus. Imagine what you could be. Imagine what we could be together as we grow. And imagine, as a result, the impact that our God could have on the world around us as we mature in Him. And we recognize that whatever comes to mind, however big our imagination is in that, amazingly, God can do more. God can do more than what we imagine. He can exceed our wildest expectations for growth. And so I start today by mentioning where I concluded last week, because I want to invite you to continue to imagine, because our imaginations inspire us to lean in and to lay those things before God so that we can continue to orient ourselves in that growth. At my house, we have a couple of house plants that are not doing very well. We kind of have my daughter makes fun of us too because she's recognized this. We're like cursed. Like we cannot seem to keep plants alive, and so we just don't know what we're doing. And so we've had plants before, outside and inside, that we try things out and they just don't work out, and we can't figure out why. Is there something about the air around us that sort of poisons the plants? Because there are a couple that we have at home we were told they're like unkillable, right? They're the kind that you don't even have to think about it. Somebody said, well, you just toss a few ice cubes in there every so often and it'll be fine. Like, that doesn't even make sense to me. But the idea is that you don't even have to water it very much. And yet, it's just falling over. It's not even like hard things to take care of, and we can't seem to do it. I recognize that sometimes our spiritual lives can feel like that, right? Like we feel like we want the best for it. We're trying to invest in it, and somehow, for whatever reason, it just doesn't seem to be growing like we expect. We need some help. We need some guidance. We need to understand how to do this thing. How do we grow? How do we flourish? How does the plant of our spirit grow in the way that God intended? Our God, our King, Jesus, helps us out in that because He gives us more than simple instruction from a distance. This is part of the beauty of the incarnation. It is not just God from far away sending down instructions that we jump through the right hoops. Instead, we have a God who comes down and walks among us. We just celebrated that very fact in the season of Christmas. We have a God who takes on flesh as one of us, and so He gives us more than instructions, although He does give us that too, but He gives us an example. Right? He gives us, He is the life that we want to mimic our own lives after. He doesn't just tell us what to do. He comes down and shows us how to do it. And so if we want to learn how to be growing, flourishing children of God, then we want to learn from the Master. We want to learn from Jesus himself. And that's what this series that we are starting today is about. Being true disciples of Jesus. Will we be his students? Will we listen to him? Will we study what he does? And will we, most importantly, follow his lead? Will we follow him? Will we be his disciples? And so as we begin to think about that, as we begin to think about being his disciples, I want to start by going back to when he called his very first disciples. As he went along and he found those who would become his close followers. Matthew chapter 4, verse 18. It says that while walking by the Sea of Galilee, Jesus saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. He said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Immediately, they left their nets, and they followed him. And going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, in the boat with Zebedee, their father, mending their nets, and he called them. Immediately, they left the boat and their father and followed him. And so this is the beginning of Jesus' ministry as he starts to begin to call people to become his students, to become his disciples, to follow him. And I don't know how many times you've been exposed to this story before, but does it seem strange to you? At least in the way that it reads, and there's more to the story than what appears right here in Matthew. Some of the other Gospels help fill it in a little bit more. But as we read it here, it seems a little strange. I mean, we have these guys that are going about their business. They're doing the thing that they always do. And seemingly, this other man just walks up and says, "Hey, follow me." And they leave everything behind, and they go and follow him. Does that seem strange? What would motivate them to do such a thing? What were they thinking? How could they just drop everything and go? Well, I think we'll explore some of that what's going on in their minds a little bit later, but I want you to notice Jesus' invitation. He's not just calling them to listen to a lecture, right? He's not just giving them a 10-step program to be better followers of God, right? Like he is saying, "Come with me." And they understand that call, and they go and they follow him. And so the first thing is we think about this idea of being disciples of Jesus. The first thing is to understand that Jesus calls us beyond belief. It's not just that he says, "Hey, believe in me, believe that I exist, believe in my identity, believe in it." Belief is good, and that's a place to start from, but the call is beyond that. The call is to believe and follow. To believe and to follow. What does it mean to follow Jesus? We're going to explore that a lot in this series. But following is the invitation. It is the calling. And those first disciples understood that. They understood that. When they put down those nets to catch fish, and they went with Jesus to go be fishers of men, they knew that from that moment on, they'd be going where he was going. That they'd be sleeping wherever he was sleeping, that they would be eating with him wherever he was eating, that they would be around the people that he was around, that their lives were now going to be with him. The invitation is still the same. The invitation is still to follow him where he leads. The rest of that sentence there, to follow him on a path of great cost. A path of great cost. It is a costly decision to follow Jesus. Just to think about those four fishermen that are in this part of the story. What do they leave behind? I mean, they leave behind a livelihood. a family business for John and his brother and their father Zebedee. They leave behind a family business, and I guess Peter and Andrew too. They walk away from those connections, and they're leaving behind their families at home to go and follow Jesus. They're leaving behind the security of knowing what the next day brings, to an extent of knowing where their head is going to rest that night. They're paying a high cost to go off with this guy, and they don't even know the half of it yet. They're going to pay much more than what they paid in that moment. We're going to discover through this that Jesus was really quite upfront about the cost, quite upfront about the challenges that there would be with following him. He doesn't offer a bait and switch program. He doesn't say, just come and get all this good stuff, and then you find out it's something different. Jesus is upfront about what he is calling people to. As he called people to join him, he reminded them to consider the cost carefully. And this is where we're going to spend a little bit of time today, is in Luke chapter 14. Jesus gives this example. It's sort of a parable, and he says this: "Which of you, desiring to build a tower, doesn't first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish it, all who see it will begin to mock him, saying, 'This man began to build and wasn't able to finish.'" He's drawing from some common sense wisdom here. If you're going to start a big project, if you're going to make a big purchase, if you're going to do something big, you need to make sure you know the magnitude of what you're getting into. There's a few times in life when people tend to make large purchases. You're buying a new car or buying a new house or something like that. We make some big purchases, and usually, if you are being wise, you sit down and you consider those things. Like is this car, is this house, is this whatever, is this the right fit for my family or for me? Is this something that I can afford to pay? Do I have enough money, or do I expect to have enough money in the near future in order to be able to pay for this? And when I look at the cost of what it is, do I actually value it that much? Is it worth it to me to buy this thing? When we consider being followers of Jesus, being actual disciples of his, it is of much greater consequence than buying a house or a car. Much, much greater consequence. And yet, it seems to me that it's not always treated that way. It seems that it can be taken lightly. And for a lot of people that show up to church every Sunday around the world, for a lot of people, really, their faith is really closer to a hobby. Their religion is on the same level as their golf game, right? For a lot of people, it just doesn't take center stage. They haven't considered the cost, really. They haven't really understood the magnitude of what it is that they are a part of, perhaps. I've always been kind of a believer in the idea, generally speaking, of you get what you pay for. There's exceptions to that all over the place, but generally speaking, things that are very cheap are cheap for a reason, right? There's a cost-cutting thing that's happened somewhere along the way. Either they've cut corners on the quality of the item, or they have gotten some suspiciously cheap labor or something like that. Somewhere along the way, if something is too cheap, it makes me suspicious. Also, if I buy something that's too cheap, often I am liable to be more careless with it. I'm not as careful with that thing because I figure if it breaks, whatever, it didn't cost me much anyways. Right? I can get another one. On the flip side, when something is much more expensive, I realize with things there is a level of diminishing returns, but generally speaking, something is more expensive, it's often because it is of higher quality or has longer lasting durability. And I also want to take care of it. I want to protect it. I hold it in high regard. It's more special to me. And so with that kind of built-in framework of understanding things in our lives, we come before Jesus and we evaluate. Is this cost reflective of a value that I'm placing on it? When we consider the cost of following Jesus, we recognize that it is very high. I want to walk through some of the things that it costs us. First is this: following him means that he comes first. Following him means that he comes first. He is above all else. Jesus is number one. I don't think there is a Christian who calls themselves a Christian that would say they disagree with that statement, at least in theory. To say that Jesus is number one is something that every Christian should nod their head in agreement with, but we need to be clear about what that actually means. What do we mean when we say that Jesus is our highest priority, that he is number one, that he comes first? Just before Jesus gives the little depiction of imagining building a tower and counting the cost, he says that in the context of what he says right before it. He has some hard words to say. In Luke 14:25, it says that great crowds accompanied him, and he turned to them and he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever doesn't bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple." We'll come back to that last sentence. But look at what he says. If you come to me and you don't hate your whole family, then you can't be my disciple? Jesus, what are you talking about? Hate? I thought I was supposed to honor my father and mother. Right? Aren't we supposed to be people that are known for our love for one another? How can you say that I'm supposed to hate them? This is one of the reasons why context is extraordinarily important. Because you can see how you could rip this verse out of context and really misapply it and misrepresent the teachings of Jesus. Context is important here. What he is saying here is an expression of Hebraic reasoning. This shows up in some other places, but it is representative about the way that a Hebraic rabbi would present sometimes the choice between two things. You hear Jesus say this in other places, like you can't follow two masters. You're going to love one and hate the other, right? You see God actually express this through, I think it's the prophet Malachi, when he says that Jacob I have loved and Esau I have hated. It's not tied to like an emotion or like a maliciousness, that sort of thing. It's a way of expressing that if you were, imagine two possibilities right here, and you were placed in front of them, and you have to turn towards one, which turns your back on the other. It's a way of expressing that. Of saying that you love the one and hate the other is saying I'm turning towards this and away from this when the choice is between the two. And so it's kind of like when I've done weddings before and give the wedding vows, and you go through, I'll take you in sickness and in health and all these sorts of things and cherish and honor you and all this. And there's a phrase that often shows up in there that says, forsaking all others, I choose you. Right? There's that phrase. It's that kind of thought, that forsaking all others. It doesn't mean that I want to like pour out some vengeance on all others. It's just saying that I choose you over them. And that's what Jesus is expressing here. He's highlighting. I mean, it's still strong language, but he's highlighting just how far above everyone else Jesus is to be for his followers. And so, yes, we are called to honor our father and mother. We're called to love people, and that's not taken away here. He's just saying that even above all of that, as high as that is, above all of that, if you're placed in between those Jesus and those, you choose Jesus. Of course, Jesus isn't on a mission to break apart families. The ideal is that the entire family supports one another as they all seek after Jesus. But if it comes to a choice, then whatever the choice is, there is no proper ordering that places anyone above him. Which really makes sense when we understand who it is that we're talking about, right? When we understand who Jesus is, it makes sense that it's impossible to prioritize anyone above him if you properly understand just created order, right? As Paul says in Colossians 1:15, he, Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. By him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. For him. And he is before all things. In him, all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that is in everything he might be preeminent. Like, how many more ways can Paul say it? Like, he is the top. He is the way that things work. In just the created order of things, he is at the top. Putting anything above him denies the way things are made. And so glorifying him, if we are to be his disciples, part of the cost is recognizing that following him means he comes first. And glorifying him is our priority. It's our priority. And all of our relationships, with whomever they are, all of our relationships must honor Christ. Any relationship that pulls us away from him has to be either reoriented toward him or let go of. That's part of the cost. That's what he calls us to. The reality of the cost of following Jesus is that it may cost us relationships that we value. And Jesus doesn't shy away from that. And when we find that that is a price that we are paying, when it costs us a relationship, then that's a time to pray for the redemption of that relationship. Pray that God can come in and redeem and reorient things. But if the choice is between him and them, it's him every time. To go back to the passage again, when he says, if anybody comes after me, you got to turn away from, you got to hate the rest of your family. Otherwise, you can't be my disciple. And he says, even his own life, even your own life. He emphasizes that point by saying, whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Bear your own cross. How strange that must have sounded at the time. Because recognize we have the hindsight of knowing the story of Jesus' own crucifixion. We have the context for that just isn't there when he says it. You can imagine him saying that to people, if you want to be my disciple, you got to bear a cross. And you're like, what do you mean by bear a cross? Like, you mean like those things that the Romans used to execute people? We got to bear a cross. What are you talking about? And imagine this going on in the minds of people hearing him say these things and going, man, this guy Jesus, he's so extreme. He's so extreme. And of course, he will make it make sense with his own example in time. But we recognize this truth as part of the cost, that following him means he comes first, and following him means I come last. I come last. We put him above everyone else, and we lay down our very lives to follow him. There was a somewhat popular kind of Christian campaign a few years ago that you still see around sometimes, the idea that I am second, which there's a lot of cool things, stories that came out of that, and I'm not opposed to it. But I think that saying I am second isn't quite far down enough. It's I am last, right? I am last. It's good, but not far enough. And when we say that I am last, if I say that I bear my cross, I put myself last, it does not mean that we don't value our lives. Not at all. It's that we fully entrust our lives to him. We lay our lives, as valuable as they are, at his feet. The fact of our lives' value is why the cost is so high. We lay them down before him. Paul said in Romans 12, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good, acceptable, and perfect. He's describing here the giving of our whole selves over to him, a living sacrifice, and in the process we are transformed. We'll come back to that in a moment. But when laying down our lives certainly includes a willingness to die for him. But it's also laying down the trajectory of our lives. Like laying down the ins and outs of our daily lives, laying down before him our hopes, laying our lives in front of him, laying down our dreams, our plans, our purposes, the things that we imagine that we would be doing in the future. If we're laying down our life before him, we're taking that and we're saying, only if you will. We're giving that up to him. You can imagine those fishermen, James and John, Peter and Andrew, and Jesus came along and he said, come and I'll make you fishers of men. And they probably had an idea of where their life was going, right? They probably had some plans. They probably talked about, what they would be doing when they were, 20 years older from where they were now, and imagined those things, and imagined growing their fishing business perhaps, and who they would marry, and all these sorts of things. And in the moment that Jesus comes along and they lay those nets down, they're laying down their whole lives. The whole trajectory of their future is now in his hands. It's going where he leads them, not where they imagined they might go. And Jesus was doing that sort of thing from the very beginning. When he was born, we talked about it before, imagine Mary and Joseph. What did they imagine their lives together was going to be like? And then Jesus comes. Mary shows up pregnant before she was planned to be, and their life certainly didn't go the direction that they had imagined, and yet it was to the glory of God. But Jesus does this with us as well. Are you willing to lay down what you thought you'd be? Are you willing to lay down what you thought or who you thought you'd be? Are you willing to lay down having what you thought you'd have? Living where you thought you'd live? Doing what you thought you'd do? And Jesus finishes out that section in Luke 14 by saying in verse 33, so therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. He doesn't say, it's going to be harder for you to be my disciple. He's saying you can't do it. Right? This is what it means to be his follower, is to let go of those things. Renounce all that I have. Jesus just doesn't hold back. It's like It's like, Jesus, do you even want people to follow you? It's like you're telling them all these things they have to give up. And it amounts to literally everything. And that's the third under here is when we're considering the cost, is following him means letting go of literally everything else. Everything else. And so ask yourself, is there anything that I wouldn't let go of to follow Jesus? Like, can you think of anything in your life that you have or that you hope to have that you would not let go of? If Jesus said you need to set that down to come follow me over here, you wouldn't let go of it. Is there a possession, a relationship, a career, some sort of status, a location that you live in or hope to live in? Is there anything at all that would hold you back? There were some people in Jesus' day who came to him thinking they could get something from him to just add to their lives. Like, just keep doing what they're doing and just add some Jesus in. Like add these good things and then carry on with their way. They wanted to add to their status by being with Jesus. They wanted to add to their possessions by being with Jesus, and they were missing the point. As Jesus was going along one time, here in Luke chapter 9, it says that someone said to him, "I will follow you wherever you go," which sounds really good and promising. Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Somebody comes to him and wants to follow him, and he's like, "Okay, but we don't know where we're sleeping tonight." Another he said, "Follow me." And Jesus invites somebody to follow him. And he says, "Lord, let me go first bury my father." Jesus said to him, "Leave the dead to bury their own dead, but as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God." Yet another said, "I will follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at home." Jesus said to him, "No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." And again, it's like, do you want them to follow you or not? Right? Like, it seems like it's really hard, but that's the point. It's almost unfathomable that people would actually tell Jesus that they wanted to follow him, and he'd tell them to hold their camels. But that's what happens. He wants them to be absolutely clear that if they're going to follow him, it's going to be a path of great cost. He wants them to follow. He just wants them to understand what's at stake. And that's why I wanted to start this series on being a disciple here. It may seem strange to talk about how much it's going to cost us, but this is where Jesus starts with people. He wants them to consider, what is following Jesus worth to you? Is it worth everything to you? If not, then following Jesus isn't really what you want. Are you willing for it to cost you everything? And as you reflect on that, I will proclaim to you this. To go back to the very first point up there and finish it out. He invites us to follow him on a path of great cost, but it's a path of even greater value. It may be a costly path, but the value of that path far exceeds its cost. I mentioned earlier, sometimes you often get what you pay for, right? And I have that philosophy. Backfires sometimes when it comes to material goods. That sometimes I find that I way overspent on something, and it turned out it was not worth it to me, and I could have gotten away with spending a lot less and that sort of thing. But then there are other times where I could have taken the cheap route, and I decided to splurge, right? I decided to spend just a little bit more, and I discovered that I'm so glad I did because it is way worth it. In this situation, and you start telling people like, yes, I get this one, I know it costs a little more, but you'll be glad you did because it's totally worth it. Something like that, only far greater, is happening here. Following Jesus costs our lives, and yet it is so much more valuable than that. Jesus illustrates this with a parable in Matthew 13:44. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure in a field, which a man found and covered up, and then in his joy he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. You see, he pairs up here the idea of being overwhelmed with joy and selling everything you have. You see the comparison there. Letting go of everything can be a joyful event when you recognize that what you are getting in return far exceeds everything that you've lost. Paul would describe in Philippians, he would describe all that he had accomplished and all that he was and the rising star of being a Pharisee that he was. He would describe that as rubbish compared to knowing Christ. He got it. And Peter, one day, walking along in Mark chapter 10, Peter says to Jesus, "See, we've left everything and followed you." Like, we did it. Jesus, see, we did this. Jesus said, "Truly I say to you, there is no one who has left house or brothers or mother or father or children or lands for my sake and for the gospel who will not receive 100-fold now in this time houses and brothers and sisters and mothers and children and lands with persecutions, and in the age to come, eternal life." And there's a lot you could unpack there, but I just want you to recognize that Jesus shows the equation and says, look, yeah, you gave up a lot, but what you're getting is so much more valuable. So much more. That's the math of discipleship that we need to grasp. So then why is it such a great value? Why is it worth letting go of everything to follow him, to be his disciple? The quick and easy answer is, of course, well, we get to go to heaven one day, right? That's the eternal life. There's more to it than that, though. There's more to it than that. A lot of imagination is spent on the wonders of heaven. Like imagining what will it be? Will there be golf courses made of gold? Right? Like will I get to do all of that? Will I be able to eat all of the best foods that I could imagine and never get full? We sort of imagine all of these things. But that's not really the point. The real prize is not the mansion, robe, and crown. The real prize is Christ himself. The real prize is Christ himself, being united with him, being transformed in the process of following him down the road, being transformed to be more and more accurate reflections of his very nature. And that's what all the stuff of the world gets in the way of. That's why it costs us everything. We got to clear all that stuff out because it gets in the way of the process of our transformation. It has to be let go of and turn our backs on it so that we can focus on him and be transformed. That's our last point. It's turning from the trappings of this world to follow where he leads. We find ourselves transformed into his image. That's what we're after. That's the goal. Laying everything down doesn't earn you salvation. Can't do that. Our salvation is by the grace of God. He pays that price. But laying everything down orients our lives in salvation that we have. We are saved to be on this path. We let go of everything else because this path is more valuable than everything else. And as we follow him, it brings refreshment and wholeness to all parts of our lives as we submit them to Christ's reign, and we are transformed into his image. Jesus says this in Luke 6:40, "A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher." Everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher. In essence, the rest of this series is unpacking what Jesus says right there. What does it mean to be like our teacher? Our discipleship is our training to be like him. That is the you that you were created to be. That is the you that is distorted by this world, but is redeemed and restored in Christ. The truth is that your most authentic self is found in your life in Christ. It's who you were made to be. And when you are who you were made to be, it is life's greatest satisfaction. And it is a joy, no matter what it costs. There came a moment after the feeding of the 5,000 when the crowds showed up again, wanting to have a second helping. And Jesus told them that he wasn't going to do the bread multiplication miracle again, and instead he told them that he was the bread that they should really be eating if they wanted life. They didn't get it. And a lot of them turned and walked away. John 6, after this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. So then Jesus said to the 12, "Do you want to go away as well?" And Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we've believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God." Astonishingly, not only did Jesus let that crowd walk away, but then he turned to the 12 that stayed, and he asked them if they wanted to leave too. Jesus is so clear that this is a costly path. But Peter's response is so telling. Where else are we going to go? You're the one. You're the one. There is nothing better for us to go to. You're the one that has the words of eternal life. We know who you are. You're the Holy One of God. You're the path that we want. You are the one that we want to follow on the path. And so my prayer is that we consider the high cost of following Jesus, and we respond in a very similar way to the way that Peter did. Yes, I see the cost, but where else am I going to go? Nothing's better than you. So I want to be your disciple. So may we value Jesus above all else, above every person, everything, even our own lives. May we consistently choose him, placing ourselves, our futures in his sovereign hands. May we count the cost of being his disciple, learning from him to be like him, and find it to be worth the cost. In just a moment, we're going to sing a song, and I will be at the back of the room with the elders, and we are there for you if you have anything you want to talk about, if you have questions or you want somebody to pray with, if you are ready to become a follower of Jesus, to be baptized into him, to lay down your life in that water and be raised anew, to walk in newness of life, then we'd love to baptize you today. Whatever you need, that's what we'll be back there for. But let's conclude with these words of Jesus, and then we'll sing. Calling the crowd to him with his disciples, Jesus said to them, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it." If we can help you in any way, would you please reach out as we stand and sing?